the early investigators had the information that they needed if there were any men of grit who were willing to take the investigation wherever it led, wherever the truth would go. That is honest journalism. That is honest investigation. When there are areas where we say, well, look, we can explore all of this, but this closet door we're going to keep closed over here, that is a controlled investigation. And that's what we see again and again and again with the Warren Commission, that there are things that are like red flag obvious all over the FBI reports. Hello and welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, then welcome. I'm Jess, Connell, and I would love to earn your subscription. Today we are continuing our discussion of what we're calling JFK Circling the Truth. It's our series where we have looked through a variety of JFK related books. Primarily we have done, I think, a magazine and then a documentary, and we have possibly some newspaper sourcing coming up soon, but we've done some of these books here, and we are going to be doing a wonderful book today. I'm really excited about this one. Actually, a viewer reached out probably just 2 or 3 weeks ago and asked if they could give it to me, and it's one that I didn't have. It's a really quite new book, and one of the things that I love about it, so I've actually, for most of the books, just a quick little confession perhaps, but I think you guys know this. For most of the books, what I have done is tried to select an excellent portion that is representative of that author and their voice, while also contributing to our larger understanding of the narrative of what happened during the JFK assassination, before, during, and now after in the investigative part. So I've tried to do that for each of the books. However, full disclosure, I have not read all of those books. In fact, as we are going through the books, I'm definitely setting certain books into the for sure read all of it category. And there are some that I'm like, okay, that's a good resource for this particular topic, but maybe I'll only reference it from time to time, that sort of thing. Well, this book is one that is fairly new. Like I said, it contains excellent updated research, and it is by some of the best researchers that have written about the JFK assassination. It's called The JFK Assassination: Chokeholds That Inescapably Prove There Was a Conspiracy. So the whole theme of this book is looking at the specific data points that we can look at to know for sure that there was a conspiracy. For example, there may be parts of the case where you could go, yeah, that one could go either way, but then there's some elements that just clearly point to, look, something has been covered up here. And so the authors of this book are James DiEugenio, Paul Blow, Matt Crumpton, Andrew Eiler, and Mark Adamczyk. And you guys know I've done some interviews with Matt Crumpton, but James DiEugenio, I believe we read a book from him earlier in this series. Paul Blow, we have not gotten to read from, and I'm really excited for the selection that we're going to read from today. But before we do that, I just want to give you a quick look at this book and what it covers, because I think this is something that, especially for those of you, I have a lot of you who say, oh, Jess, I love listening to your readings because I've read a lot of those books, I've researched the case for decades, etc. And so I know some of you are like reviewing the information that you've known for many, many years. Well, this book is something that really could add to your library. So I want to let you know what's in it. Honestly, I've been reading through it. That's kind of where I was going earlier in my comment is, I haven't had the chance, but this last week I've been sick and we had some travel. And so I have spent time going through more of this book than I have with some of them. I love the style. I love the research quality. I love how clear everything is. And it's an excellent book. But the topics that are addressed in this book go from just an introduction of making sure that the proper order of what was done in the investigation and what was not done in the investigation are legally clear, which I really appreciated. I think sometimes we miss that because there was no trial for Oswald. And so we don't have some sort of legal standard that has been upheld in the case against the accused assassin. They were able to say whatever and do whatever without a legal set of parameters that our justice system has laid out for what we do with an accused person. They didn't have to adhere to that. So I really appreciated that discussion in the introduction. And then here are the topics that it goes through. It says the official record itself impeaches the Warren Commission. So there's a look at the Warren Commission. Oswald's intelligence connections. Oswald was impersonated. The timing of where Oswald was and that he could not have been on the 6th floor when the shots were fired. Jack Ruby was on a mission. That's the part that we're going to look at today. The Fair Play for Cuba Committee. And then other things like the single bullet and that sort of thing. But they look at the evidence in these particular chokehold areas that prove there was a conspiracy. So as you're considering books, I really think many of you may wish to get this particular one because it's up-to-date information. It's given through a very legal and a high standard lens of credibility, of research quality, of making sure that the statements that are presented are factual. So if you're interested, as always, books are always in the show notes. You can go, there'll be Amazon links for every book in this entire series, including this one, which is JFK Assassination Chokeholds. And D'Eugenio is the lead author if you're looking for that. So that's what you're looking for. Today, we are going to get into Jack Ruby was on a mission. This is a chapter written by Paul Blow, and we're just going to read through. We're going to get some evidence. We're going to talk through the case and then move towards the conclusion that's drawn at the end. One of the things, like I said, that I love is the research quality, and you're going to hear it in the way that information is presented in this chapter. Statement. So here's the summary statement. Jack Ruby's connections, his behavior in and around the assassination, and his statements leave no doubt that his motive to kill Lee Harvey Oswald was to eliminate him so that he could not expose the conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. Ruby was connected to the Mafia. He stalked Oswald for 2 days before murdering him. He received assistance in getting to Oswald moments before the hit. The Warren Commission withheld information about Ruby. It's a great summary statement. It's really clear and simple. This is where we're headed. The introduction is this. The Warren Commission concluded that the murders of JFK, Officer JD Tippit, and Lee Harvey Oswald within 48 hours were perpetrated by 2 lone assassins, Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby. Concerning Ruby, the Warren Commission stated the following. These are all quotes. The commission has found no evidence that Jack Ruby acted with any other person in the killing of Lee Harvey Oswald. The commission believes that the evidence does not establish a significant link between Ruby and organized crime. The commission concluded that Ruby entered the basement unaided, probably via the Main Street ramp, and no more than 3 minutes before the shooting of Oswald. Ruby was never involved in pro or anti-Castro Cuban activities. Rumors of a relationship between Ruby and Oswald have proven groundless. And they concluded that testimony by Seth Cantor that he saw Jack Ruby and exchanged with him at Parkland Hospital right after JFK was taken there was not credible. So those are the conclusions of the Warren Commission. Over and above this, according to the Warren Commission, the motive for killing Oswald was limited to wanting to spare Jackie Kennedy the ordeal of going through a trial, and later was shifted to temporary insanity caused by anguish over JFK's murder. Later investigations and research into Jack Ruby completely dismantled the Warren Commission assessments of him and led to one conclusion. Oswald could not be permitted to speak, and Jack Ruby was the guy chosen to take him out. One thing that we haven't gone through yet in our discussion is the actual facts of the moments when Lee Oswald was killed, was assassinated himself, put to death by Jack Ruby. So a quick overview would be, we went through Lee Oswald's time in custody. At the end of that time, it was put on notice to the media that Oswald was going to be transferred from the police department to the jail. And in that process, media people set up around the ramp, waiting, videoing, looking for that transfer vehicle. This was a big deal. Everyone knew this was the news of the day. There was a time given, and the time was not kept to. I believe it was extended by over an hour. Jack Ruby was at the Western Union sending a money order to one of the young ladies that worked at his club. He sent that and reportedly immediately went to the police department. Now, Roy Vaughn was stationed at the top of the ramp. He indicated that no one passed that way. And in fact, that is where the media trucks were stationed. So there's actually good reason to think, because they were constantly videoing. Had someone had any video or testimony that he had gone there, it would have come out. And in fact, some of the media personnel affirmed they also had not seen anyone. There is one former officer that came and testified and said he saw a man go down the ramp. As you remember, if you've seen my recent Dealey Plaza video, at the very end of that video, we went over to this very ramp. And the ramp is not a wide one. In the JFK movie, it's pictured much wider. And in my head, I perceived it more like a double ramp, like two vehicles could pass. It is not that. One large vehicle would fill the hole going down to the ramp. And so it wasn't a situation where Roy Vaughn could be slightly distracted and someone could kind of slip in over here because it's so far away. It's not that. There is no way you could get past without being seen. Roy Vaughn, you might remember, he was my childhood police chief in Midlothian, Texas, where I grew up. And, you know, I don't know him personally. I mean, I met him several times, but I can't speak to his level of credibility. But others who did, like Penn Jones and like Robert Groden, testified that until the time of his death, Roy Vaughn never changed his stance, that he did not see any person go down that ramp. He insisted Jack Ruby did not go down the ramp that way. Robert Groden believes that perhaps he went down a spiral staircase that led out right into the place where he did emerge from, but that is all unproven. We don't know that. So that's the gist of it. He comes down. If you watch the video footage, there's something interesting that happens, which is that there is a honk when Oswald emerges. It's literally, you hear someone yell out, "He's coming," or something like that. Like, here's Oswald, when there's a honk. And then Oswald comes along. He's with Jim Lavelle. They come along, and then there's another honk. And then right then, Jack Ruby steps out. Now, you could say, I know some people have responded and saying, well, it's a parking garage. Of course, there's lots of honking going on. To me, you listen to this whole video, there's a period of time. The only two honks involved are immediately when he emerges and the very second before the shot happens. It seems like a signal to me. Who knows? But those are the facts. Jack Ruby steps out. I've also seen alleged on some videos in the comments that people say, well, it wasn't even Jack Ruby. We never see his face. It's true, we don't see his face, but the entire police crew and news reporters that were there all saw him. He was immediately detained. Oswald was immediately put on to a stretcher, taken away immediately to Parkland. He was not permitted to go into trauma room 1, where the president had passed away just 2 days before. He was put in trauma room 2. They did try to do some surgery. We read about some of that in Dr. Charles Crenshaw's book, and he dies there. So that's the gist of the story. Now let's get into the evidence about it and why it points to a conspiracy. Bert Griffin and Leon Hubert put a fly in the WC ointment. So that would be the Warren Commission. Lisa Pease, in an August 1995 Probe article, gives a good summary of the memos written by assistant counsels to the Warren Commission, who were tasked with investigating Ruby. So those two men, Bert Griffin and Leon Hubert. These are the quotes. We'll go through them. There are several lengthy quotes that we're going to walk through. One is, the most promising links between Jack Ruby and the assassination of President Kennedy are established through underworld figures and anti-Castro Cubans and extreme right-wing Americans. So those are the connections that Jack Ruby has. 2 months later, Griffin and Hubert wrote another memo to the commission significantly titled Adequacy of the Ruby Investigation, in which they warned, "We believe that a reasonable possibility exists that Ruby has maintained a close interest in Cuban affairs to the extent necessary to participate in gun sales or smuggling." You may remember we talked about this in our previous episodes about Jack Ruby. There was credible trips that Jack Ruby had been taking to Cuba, doing some gun running as a way to make money. Now, who was he doing it for? Was it underworld? Was it intelligence? Was it some other Cuban groups? That was not established in the readings that we have done. But there is definitely a connection between Ruby and gun running to Cuba, for sure. I believe there were 5 or 6 trips that he took in the 6 to 12 months prior to the assassination. So that's quite a bit of gun running to Cuba going on. Ruby had talked about it himself while in jail, and he reportedly told a friend, "They're going to find out about Cuba. They're going to find out about the guns, find out about New Orleans, find out about everything." Tales of Ruby running guns to Cuba abounded in the FBI reports taken in the first weeks after the assassination, yet neither the Warren Commission nor the House Select Committee pursued those leads very far. Griffin and Hubert expressed concern over this, saying that neither Oswald's Cuban interests in Dallas nor Ruby's Cuban activities have been adequately explored. So one of the things that I hope you're experiencing, I am definitely feeling it as we read through these materials, is high levels of irritation that the early investigators had the information that they needed. If there were any men of grit who were willing to take the investigation wherever it led, wherever the truth would go. That is honest journalism. That is honest investigation. When there are areas where we say, well, look, we can explore all of this, but this closet door we're going to keep closed over here. That is a controlled investigation. And that's what we see again and again and again with the Warren Commission, that there are things that are like red flag obvious all over the FBI reports. And yet the investigations are like, oh, look over there. Let's avoid talking about this thing over here. And that is not just irritating. It is unjust. It is perpetrating a decades-long lie and cover-up that has harmed the fabric of our American government and our trust with that government. Hubert and Griffin expressed in their memo of May 14th to Rankin that, quote, "We believe that the possibility exists based on evidence already available that Ruby was involved in illegal dealings with Cuban elements who might have had contact with Oswald. The existence of such dealings can only be surmised since the present investigation has not focused on that area." They expressed concern that Ruby had time to engage in substantial activities in addition to the management of his clubs. Yeah, he was a mover and a shaker. I mean, we see that on the day of the assassination where he is here, there, and everywhere. He is taking out ads, paying a stripper, talking to this person, he's even reportedly seen in Oak Cliff. There are so many movements of Jack Ruby, it is very difficult to keep track of where in the world he was and what he was doing. They also added that Ruby has always been a person who looked for money-making sidelines. What Griffin and Hubert kept coming back to was that there was, quote, much evidence that Ruby was interested in Cuban matters. They cited various relationships that he had, purchases he had made, and his quick correction, which we have noted, of Wade's remark that Oswald was a member of the Free Cuba Committee. He calls out the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He knows the facts. How does he know the facts at the midnight press briefing about Oswald, this man who he reportedly had nothing to do with, had no information about? He had information about him. He knew the proper name of the club. He was ready to insert it into the ether of the information about the assassination. And it shows he knew more than we knew. He knew more than we're being told. There's a reference to the church committee and Senator Schweiker's acknowledgement and expression of the following. J. Edgar Hoover writes, "Yes, we did have a relationship with Mr. Ruby, and he acted as our informant." Now, who said that at the time of the Warren Commission report? Did anybody ever imply that Jack Ruby was a confidential informant for the FBI? Nobody breathed that. That was classified. So here in the church committee, we have our own government impugning our own government, saying, you guys lied to us back there. The frustrating thing about being in 2025, after Warren Commission, HSCA, Church Committee, Rockefeller Commission, the ARRB in the 90s, is that at every point people are going, oh, those people back there lied to us and they covered stuff up. But then when the CIA appoints, for example, George Joannides to be the manager over the go-between between the committee and the CIA, everybody's like, oh, but that guy's totally being honest with us. Like, they never go, oh, they're doing it right now. They're doing it again. Those people are still controlling the information that we have. And at no point is somebody going, I think we need to evaluate the people who are giving us information in each of these committees. The people who are saying, oh no, we don't have to look at that because the CIA has definitely investigated that and says there's no connection there. Like, we need to show some scrutiny of that. Well, it dives into Ruby's mob connections, and we'll just get a little quick overview of this, but here is the brief introduction we're given to that. From his early days in Chicago to the time of the assassination, Ruby was always involved in illegal activities, including narcotics, prostitution, and gambling. He belonged to a mafia group known as the Yiddish Connection. Dallas County Sheriff Guthrie told the FBI he believed Ruby, quote, operated some prostitution activities and other vices in his club. So there's connections with many different mafia figures. The Chicago gang with links to Capone is mentioned here. Carlos Marcello. Lots of names that would be familiar to you if you're into the mafia and the mob. But they give us a helpful graphic that shows Santo Traficante's links to persons of interest. And it has all sorts of people who are connected to the case. Some of them, like Johnny Roselli, Sam Giancana, people at the CIA like Dulles show up on here, Jack Ruby, Frank Sturgis, etc. So again, if you're interested in research and adding to knowledge, making connections, connecting dots, this book is a really good addition probably for your library. Well, another area that they dive into in this chapter is suspicious phone calls. The HSCA also analyzed Ruby phone calls during the weeks leading up to the assassination. Not only do they expose a frenzy of growing activity, they reveal a number of suspicious calls. So there's lots of mobster activity and various localities that he's calling. But this chart is actually really fantastic. It shows the nature of all of his calls in frequency. I mean, it literally skyrockets in September. And one of the things that's interesting about September is a whole lot of things begin falling into place for the assassination, including things like Lee Oswald's employment, Lee and Marina returning from New Orleans. Many things fall into place and suddenly start clicking. Suddenly connections are made. Suddenly this person's gone or this person's in place. And this is one of those things as well. All of a sudden his calls are going up. What was happening? What was being planned? What were all the calls about? Interesting question. Ruby and Oswald is an area explored by this chapter. As noted by Robert Blakey, while speculative, both Oswald and Ruby have links to Marcello. It's indirect in the case of Oswald. Did Jack Ruby cross paths with Oswald before he stalked him during his weekend in jail? Another link between Oswald and Ruby comes through their interactions with a gun smuggler and friend of Castro. Robert McEwen, who had also been jailed for these activities. He claimed that at one time he got a call from Ruby, who tried to use these ties in his efforts to convince the Castro regime to free Traficante. So again, way more information given on this. It talks about the cop-friendly informant relationship that Jack Ruby had. All officers could come into his club and get coffee for free when they were on duty. One of the things that the Grodins pointed out to me when we went to the police station where its location was in 1963 is that it's only a matter of a couple of blocks from where Jack Ruby's club was. It's not far at all. And it's all right there. You know, it's closer to get to Jack Ruby's club than it would be to get to Dealey Plaza from where the police station was. So just interesting. Gerald Ford, in his otherwise uninformative book, little dig there at the former president, called Portrait of an Assassin, he did reveal that Ruby had been an FBI informant. And before dying, Ruby made the claim that there was a high-level conspiracy. It goes into the claim by Seth Cantor, which we have done before, so I won't belabor this point, but Seth Cantor knew Jack Ruby. He was in the press vehicle during the deadly motorcade, and he encountered Jack Ruby at Parkland Hospital at 1:28. He's an honorable man. He knew Ruby personally. This wasn't some sort of moment of confusion. They actually had a conversation that was specifically about Jack Ruby's clubs. It was memorable to Seth Cantor, not just because he knew Jack Ruby, but because at the very moment when Jack Ruby's trying to grab him for this conversation, Seth is wanting to go towards the Mac Kilduff press briefing. So it stands out in his mind as like, I want to acknowledge Jack Ruby. I haven't talked to him in 18 months, but also I need to get in that room and not miss what's about to be said. So very credible. He is the one who wrote the book called Who Was Jack Ruby, back there on my shelf. But after reading Cantor's book there, Bert Griffin, who had developed these conclusions about Jack Ruby that Seth Cantor must have been mistaken, he actually changed his mind about Ruby not appearing. He later stated, the greater weight of the evidence indicates he did see Ruby at Parkland. It's one of these things where, oh yeah, the thing that we said back there, we didn't know. And it's like, well, okay, then let's exercise greater discernment here in this time and place with the information that we have. And you know, that would be my charge and my hope for people like, you know, Jefferson Morley and Anna Paulina Luna, who are doing current day investigations and digging reportedly into these things, combing through the JFK files. I don't know if you caught it, but last week she actually made the statement that she believed a new government statement needs to be put out that collates the facts that we have about the JFK assassination. She totally impugns the Warren Commission and says that new facts need to be clearly stated by our government so that the American people can know what happened. And I think that's great. I hope that they will continue to do more digging. I think there are times when in her statements, I get the sense that she has like a quarter inch of familiarity, and she's relying, yes, on good researchers. They have brought good researchers to the committees, but my hope would be that there's deep research happening and that the statements she's making are supportable and robust enough to withstand the criticism that will certainly come by Warren Commission defenders. Well, the conclusions of this chapter are this. The claim that Oswald was a loner with no ties with intelligence agencies is one of the greatest deceptions put forth by the Warren Commission. The description of his murderer by the Warren Commission as another deranged person with no significant mob ties comes very close. For example, the phone calls that he was a part of in the weeks leading up to the murder that were analyzed by the HSCA revealed a frenzy of communications with known mobsters. Subsequent to his arrest, Ruby on a number of occasions said words to the effect that others at very high levels were involved. that he was forced into the position he was in. Remember, he appealed to the Warren Commission directly to Warren, to Chief Justice Earl Warren, saying, take me to Washington and I'll give you the information I have. I can't say it here. I'm not guarded here in Dallas. They didn't do it. They said, well, we don't have the facilities to do that. We don't have the mandate to do that. So you need to tell us whatever. And of course he didn't. When he was accorded his appeal for a retrial, his mental evaluation was put into the hands of CIA MK Ultra linked Louis Jolyon West. Ruby claimed he was injected with cancer-causing cells and died shortly after of galloping cancer. I mean, not only that, but before Jolly West's visits, Ruby, he was a man who, just like his frenetic activity in real life, he could talk all kinds of crazy things, but no one accused him of having had a psychological break. But after Jolly West's visits, suddenly Jolly West was saying, yeah, he's had a mental breakdown. There's very good evidence that was Jolly West's specialty, was experimenting on people, inducing psychotic states, understanding the use of psychotropic medicines as well as hallucinogenics. And that was probably purposefully induced into Jack Ruby even before perhaps he was injected with cancer-causing cells. The Warren Commission didn't even want to question Ruby initially. When they finally did meet him, they were not very probing. When Ruby offered to say more if he were brought up to Washington, Chief Warren wanted none of it. It's a matter of record that Ruby was mob connected. Ruby was a gun runner. He was an FBI informant. He was close to the Dallas Police Department. He had easy access to Oswald during the 48 hours preceding his murder. Ruby eliminated the most important witness to JFK's murder. The head of the HSCA concluded that Ruby was an accomplice in the overall plot. The Warren Commission did little investigation into Ruby and his connections. The Warren Commission misrepresented Ruby and his behavior. The HSCA, while torching the traditional narrative about Ruby and the WC fantasy, used mild language in exposing the obvious. On that, let's leave the final word to the HSCA. Quote, Ruby's shooting of Oswald was not a spontaneous act, in that it involved at least some premeditation. Similarly, the committee believed it was less likely that Ruby entered the police basement without assistance, even though the assistance may have been provided with no knowledge of Ruby's intentions. So that is the conclusion to this chapter. Again, this kind of reminds me of Hit List in the way that it's a very specific, edited down look at a particular angle. And that's what they've done with 10 different JFK assassination chokeholds in this book. So I hope you enjoyed the book. I hope you enjoyed the reading and our discussion of Jack Ruby's murder of Lee Oswald. I can't wait to read your comments, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.